The old pilot believed he was going to have the flight of his life. He'd been planning this trip for months and even saved up extra to get an upgrade. His name was Frank, and he had served in the Air Force for over 20 years before retiring with the rank of major. Now, he wanted to visit his son, who lived in Florida and hadn't seen him in a long time. Because he knew this would be the flight of his life, he decided to save up for months to get a first-class ticket. However, as soon as he arrived at the airport, everything went wrong. It was then that he met a very special woman who changed everything for him. But according to our records, you're not entitled to any discounts. Maybe she should have been more respectful, but she was having a bad day already and didn't need any additional stress. So she simply said, "If you don't want anything, I'll leave you alone," and walked away. She explained that she'd heard about his situation and wanted to know if everything was okay. The old man was touched by her kindness. He knew that no matter what happened next, the rest of his trip would be unforgettable. Frank, surprised by the attention, explained that the employee at the check-in desk had ungiven him the discount he was entitled to and that the flight attendant had been rude to him. The old man frowned. "I called the airline, and they told me veterans could travel for half price," he explained. The employee shook his head. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an emergency on board and need to land immediately. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of the flight attendants." The passengers were scared, but knew they had to stay calm. This was a terrifying situation, but luckily the pilots were experienced and knew exactly what to do. Perhaps he deserved that rude woman's disrespect because of his own attitude. "I'd like you to come back on board so I can give you a first-class ticket for the return flight free of charge. And I'd also like to invite you to join us in first class for the rest of your stay." No one knew how serious his condition was. Amelia stayed calm and followed the paramedics. Inside was a brand new suitcase and several boxes filled with new clothes. Frank couldn't hold back his tears. Frank looked around and spotted her standing by the stairs leading onto the plane. She was smiling at him. In all his 75 years, he had never felt so honored. "I don't know what I would have done without you." She took his hand and replied, "You don't need to thank me, sir. It was my pleasure. I'm glad I could help." "Everyone, I have an important announcement," he said. It's more than just a trip. It's a celebration of friendship and respect." The passengers leaned forward, eager to hear what he had to say. Her story serves as an example for other employees, reminding them that even the smallest gesture can change someone's life forever. His post went viral, and many people praised the airline for its incredible customer service. She brought him food and drinks whenever he wanted, and even offered him her phone, so he could call his son and tell him he was on his way. Their small act of kindness had made a big difference in the veteran's life. The old man appreciated her dedication, but couldn't help feeling a little sad. They cheered for him, thanking him for his service. Frank was deeply moved by the gesture and thanked the captain, promising to be back as soon as he was able to. He's awake and recovering. His name is Frank, and he's a veteran who served in the Air Force. I want to honor him today. I've already spoken to him and assured him that if something like this happens again, he'll be fired immediately. At that moment, the passengers burst into applause. He missed flying, and seeing Amelia navigate the skies so effortlessly reminded him of his glorious days in the Air Force. He was ready to apologize to her when suddenly a new voice echoed through the cabin. There were employees from the airline, the captain, and other passengers who had followed Amelia's lead. The sight was overwhelming. That was probably just a mistake. "I'm sorry, sir, but you'll have to pay full fare, like everyone else." An old man dressed in his veteran's uniform approached the check-in desk for Flight 234 to Orlando. But his face turned pale, and he started sweating. Amelia noticed this and immediately called for medical assistance. A team of paramedics rushed to his aid and managed to stabilize him. But they needed to make an emergency landing as soon as possible. But he couldn't. All he had was his worn-out discharge papers and the clothes on his back. He paid the expensive ticket and sat down dejected. But when he got to the desk, the employee looked at his discharge papers and said, "Sir, I'm sorry. There were no seats available in first class." So he was placed in the last row of economy on a broken plastic chair with barely any legroom. He felt miserable. When he closed his eyes, all he could think about were the happy times he'd spent flying fighter jets, being admired by everyone around him. Now he was just another passenger sitting in a crowded airplane. At that moment, Frank felt humiliated and angry. For the first time since his honorable discharge, He wished he could put on that uniform again and demand respect. The old man looked at her and asked, "Are you talking to me? Did I say something?" The young woman frowned. "Yes, I'm talking to you. Do you want anything?" she asked. Frank couldn't believe it. Hadn't she noticed his uniform? She probably thought he was just some homeless person. How dare she treat him like that, he thought. When he boarded the plane, he was shocked. Suddenly, a flight attendant approached him and said, "Would you like some water? Or perhaps a free magazine?" The flight attendant saw the old man's angry look and felt guilty. At that moment, Frank felt terrible. He understood that age and arrogance were taking their toll on him. A beautiful woman dressed in a pantsuit approached the old man and introduced herself as Amelia, one of the airline's managers. Amelia immediately apologized and promised to personally take care of his travel expenses and ensure he received the best service on board. As the flight took off, Amelia kept an eye on Frank to make sure he was comfortable. All of a sudden, Frank felt unwell. He tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a stomachache from the cheap plane food. The captain made the announcement. Frank was taken off the plane on a stretcher and rushed to the hospital. Everyone watched anxiously as the ambulance drove away. As the hours passed, people began to forget about the incident, until suddenly the captain appeared in the cabin holding a microphone. "I'm the captain of this flight. I want to let you know that the gentleman who was taken to the hospital is doing well," the captain continued. "I also want to say that the employee who checked him in was disrespectful and went against company policy. Then something incredible happened." The captain turned to Frank's seat and said loudly, "Major Frank, if you can hear me." Every passenger stood up and applauded as the captain finished his speech. Later, when the plane landed and Frank got off the stretcher, he noticed a group of people waiting for him. One of the airline employees handed him a bouquet of flowers, and another gave him a package. But there was still one person missing, the beautiful woman who had made all this possible. He walked over to her and said, "Thank you, Amelia." In that instant, Frank knew he had found a friend in Amelia, a friend who had reminded him that despite everything, good people still existed in the world. The next day, Frank posted about his experience on social media, tagging the airline and thanking them for their support. Amelia read all the comments and smiled. She knew that Frank's story would inspire thousands of people. Since that day, Frank has traveled with the airline every time he visits his son in Florida. Amelia is still rocking it at the airline, always there to lend a hand to anyone who needs it. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more cool stories about aviation, history, and life.